The weekly Direct Indirect Supervision Log. This short module will provide directions for completing the weekly Direct Indirect Supervision Log. In addition, we will take you through the percentage calculation process using examples. At the end of the school year, you are asked to complete a verification report. You tell us what percentage of sessions were directly supervised and how much indirect supervision you provided. In the past, how have you determined those totals? In order to assist you in making those important calculations, we have created the weekly Direct Indirect Supervision Log with a shortened name, Weekly Supervision Log, used throughout this module. We ask that you maintain this documentation as proof of your determination of the percentages that are listed on the verification report. As you can see, the supervision log is completed weekly. You start by recording the week's dates. For each day of the work week, there is a column for blocking out the amount of time spent in direct supervision. The SLP would initial the day that direct or indirect supervision is provided as a verification in case the SLPA is maintaining the documentation. Remember, direct supervision means in-view observations and guidance by the SLP, while the SLPA is working with a student. Some examples might include observations of a portion of a treatment session, coaching the SLPA while working with the targeted student, modeling for the SLPA with the targeted student, or real-time electronic supervision, in other words, virtual video conferencing. When direct supervision is provided, the activities are listed in the direct column during the corresponding time spent. It is recommended that you use initials for the students' and teachers' names. In this example, JS and TL, both students, were observed for half an hour each. Then the SLPA provided burst therapy, 5-minute kids, in TS's second grade classroom for 1 hour, while the SLP observed. During these times, the SLP may decide to document the responses of the targeted students and then compare results with the SLPA. Or the SLP may coach the SLPA through an activity or suggest strategies for streamlining the 5-minute kids process. Direct supervision can be provided in person or through real-time electronic or virtual supervision via a secure video conferencing system such as Teams. The observation must be done live in order to count it as direct supervision. Indirect supervision is the time spent reviewing documents, discussing students' strategies and materials, and making plans. It is recorded in the shaded column at the associated times. This too can be done face-to-face or through video conferencing or a telephone call. In addition, the SLP can review recorded sessions to provide feedback, but this is considered to be indirect supervision because the observations are not live. In this example, the SLP reviewed draft IEPs for an hour with the SLPA and discussed the multiple students seen in TS's classroom with the SLPA for an hour as well. This is an example of a completed form. By the way, they don't have to be typed. Certainly my forms would not look this nice. As you can see, the amount of time spent on direct and indirect supervision is totaled at the bottom of each column. Direct supervision subtotals are recorded in the direct columns. As you can see, Monday had 2 hours of direct supervision and Tuesday had 1 hour of direct supervision. And the indirect supervision subtotals are listed in the shaded columns. And now it's time for our favorite subject, math. We are calculating percentages. We're looking at the percentage of supervised sessions and the percentage of indirect supervision. Let's start with the percentage of direct supervision. You begin with the SLPA's typical therapy schedule. This number will not change much over the school year once the schedule is established. In our formula, this is called A. You add up the amount of hours spent in direct therapy per week. Next, you add up the subtotals of direct supervision, the numbers at the bottom of all of the light or unshaded columns. This is B. In order to calculate a percentage of direct supervision, you divide B by A. You divide the number of hours of direct supervision by the total number of scheduled therapy sessions in a typical week. Using our example, we had a total number of 3 hours of direct supervision, and we used 30 hours of direct therapy per week as A. We divided 3 by 30, and we got 0.10 or 10%, the minimum that is required. That number is C. In other words, C, the percentage of direct supervision, is calculated by dividing B, direct supervision hours, by A, the total hours of scheduled therapy. In order to calculate the percentage of indirect supervision, or E, we take the total hours of indirect supervision and divide it by the work week total. By work week, we mean weekly school hours minus lunch times. So if the school week is 37.5 hours of employment and we take away a half an hour of lunch every day, we end up with 35 hours for the work week. To calculate the percentage of indirect supervision, we divide the total number of hours of indirect supervision by the work week total. In our example, we would be dividing 3 hours, that's the indirect supervision, by 35 hours, the total work week length. The percentage of indirect supervision, or E, is 0.08 or 8%. In other words, E, the percent of indirect supervision, equals D, the total number of documented indirect hours, divided by the work week total. The very minimum requirement of direct and indirect supervision is 10%. As you can see, we met the minimum with direct supervision, but we did not meet the minimum with indirect supervision. Some weeks may be off a little. As long as this doesn't happen on a regular basis, it's not a cause for concern. However, it's recommended that you monitor the percentages and strive to go above the required minimums. Also remember, the determination of supervision is based on the independence level of the SLPA. Initially, a minimum of 20% direct supervision is recommended, and maybe more, based on the experience or inexperience of the SLPA and the severity or difficulty of the students on the SLPA's caseload. It won't take long before you can predict the amount of time needed to meet the minimum supervision requirements. So what about short weeks? Holidays and snow days happen. You can choose to maintain your schedule of observations as long as your supervision day is not one of the holidays or days missed. Or you can look at it on a daily basis and make sure you meet the minimums for those days. Or you can change the totals of weekly therapy to reflect the SLPA's schedule for that week and the total hours in the shortened work week. Let's use Thanksgiving week as an example. Using the same schedule of direct and indirect supervision, for the purpose of simplicity, we have a total of 3 hours of direct supervision and 3 hours of indirect supervision scheduled for that 3-day week. Note also that I blocked out the holidays and explained the reason for the abbreviated week. Let's assume that the therapy schedule is the same amount per day, 6 hours per day. If we take 2 days or 12 hours from the original total of 30 that we had before, we have a therapy schedule of 18 hours. If we take 2 7-hour days from the work week, we have 21 hours remaining, or 3 days. You would do the calculations the same, and you can see using the same totals of direct supervision and indirect supervision, our percentage calculations result in a higher number, 16% direct supervision and 14% indirect supervision. Please don't stress or worry about the short week calculations. Just make sure that you document the supervision that took place during that shortened week, and based on what you've learned about the typical minimum that is needed, make sure that you're close. In other words, the SLPA should not go the whole abbreviated week without some supervision. After a while, you will be able to approximate what is needed. We hope you find this form helpful in documenting what you do on a weekly basis. More than likely, your supervision time will be above the minimums. Ethically, you need to provide what is needed. We want to thank you for your diligence and conscientiousness and your hard work. You make a difference.